From Kroll, this is the Security Concepts Podcast, the podcast where we bring in Kroll practitioners and select outside experts to discuss risk management in all of its forms. Welcome to episode 21, where we're going to be discussing one of Kroll's newest elements, Resolver, and the tools that this new Kroll provider brings to the table, particularly in the threat management work product here at Kroll. To have this discussion, I've brought in our threat management guru, Matthew Dumpert, and I brought in Artem Sherman from Resolver. Artem is a product manager at Resolver and has been a key leader in the development of the threat management, the threat solution we're going to be discussing today. Artem has an interesting story in that he was a longtime user of the product. They got so good at customizing it that I guess Resolver just decided they needed to bring them in for their own workforce. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Looking forward to talking with Artem and our listeners.
Not sure if everyone knows, but Resolver's new to the Kroll family, and it's a product, really an app-based product that really gels well with the SRM practice. Artem, can you give us a little bit of background on Resolver and what it does?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. So Resolver is a cloud-based software that helps you gather all risk data and analyzes it in context, revealing the true business impact within every risk. Finally, instead of being disconnected from the business, risk becomes a key driver of opportunity. So Resolver offers a holistic suite of applications to help you cover all of your risk needs, including threat protection, which is what we'll be chatting about today.
Yeah, and Jeff, just to further highlight, Kroll has been an industry leader in the threat management space for decades. We've been doing this for a long time, and I'm really excited because we're now bringing all of these data points and disparate pieces of information that we have historically investigated and assessed for our clients. We're bringing that into the Resolver environment and using the Resolver platform as the backbone for everything we do in threat management. So this is really, really exciting for us.
That's a good segue, I guess, into the threat protection solution. Artem, can you give us a few details on that one?
So Resolver's threat protection solution combines advanced monitoring of internet channels, internal systems, and human reporting for threats to organizations, ensuring that you're presented with relevant and timely alerts, combined with a top-tier case management experience that allows teams to collaborate and respond.
Well, it's really interesting to hear about a new tool that the Kroll team has to use in some of these threat management engagements. That leads us directly into a question. Matt, what are we seeing are the big items in the threat management world today? What's everybody doing? What's everybody concerned with?
You know, Jeff, I think the leading organizations, many of which we're working with now, are really raising awareness within their own organization about what a threat is. What is a threat to their organization and their enterprise? Training their workforce on how to recognize it, training them and sensitizing them as to when to raise their hand when they sense something isn't right, whether that's from your insider threat or something from outside the organization. Raising awareness that threats to people, property, reputation, and sensitive information can come from anywhere, and they can materialize into real losses and be very damaging. The key here is really getting everybody on the same page, clearly defining what that threat is, and then putting a standardized process in place for intake, investigation, assessment, collation, and ultimately using all of the organization's skills and capabilities to address each threat.
Excellent. And that's really where Resolver's playing a role with your team, correct? And helping them manage a lot of this, the process where you need to get everything in line and get everything going in the proper order. That's where Resolver's really jumping in and kind of helping you out, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The bringing together of Kroll and Resolver earlier this year was tremendously exciting for me and our group. One of the things that organizations struggle with routinely is connecting dots, is bringing together disparate parts of information, disparate pieces of information, and putting it all together into one environment so a true assessment can be conducted. Artem, can you talk about how Resolver does that and brings all of these disparate parts and pieces together and allows the client to really draw some powerful conclusions and conduct a full assessment of what they may be dealing with?
Sure, Matt. That's where we really come together really nicely in that Resolver provides the platform to be able to do all of those activities, capture all of that data, track all of that work and information, have the workflow and accountability in place to make sure that those repeatable processes occur to the standards that you establish and measured against the risks that are important to your organization. And that's really the power of the platform. A lot of organizations out there try and implement programs without the right tooling in place. And a lot of process fails if there isn't an easy way to execute it. And that's where Resolver comes in with our solutions.
And the repeatable process to me really stood out. That's really important, and it's critical to the work that we do in threat management. Because while an organization may deal with threats from all different vectors, right? It could be an insider threat. It could be a workplace violence issue. It could be something materializing on social media. It could be a threat to an executive. There's no limit of the threats that are out there. But if it's not handled in a standardized way with a standardized methodology, we really risk overlooking something. And when we play in this space, when we work in this space, we can't afford to miss small details. So one of the most powerful thing I've seen from Resolver is really in that incident and case management apparatus, and making sure that the users, that the threat management teams, that the security departments and the risk managers are picking up on all of the breadcrumbs of information and using everything that's available to them in the full and true assessment of what they're dealing with. That to me is one of the most powerful things that the Resolver platform can offer to a threat management engagement.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. The key is there that all of this work already happens, and a lot of organizations spend a ton of hours and labor on executing all of these tasks. But without a platform that makes it easier to track than the manual processes that exist, all of that data essentially gets lost in a filing cabinet with some paperwork. So what we enable is for you to be able to capture the very important data as you go through those repeatable tasks day to day. So that way you could then relate back to it, paint a fuller picture of what's going on, and connect the dots.
Yeah, I think efficiency has to be maximized in this type of situation. It's a current hot situation that needs to be responded to. So when we have seen out in the field some of our clients that may have, a less robust system where they're keeping track of incidents and threat data and all these different things, and it takes them hours to go through and match things up and look at Excel spreadsheets, I can certainly see where having the tool in place and having this data at hand makes things much easier for everybody. The threats are everywhere. And that's something that I know, Matt, you're working on quite often. These threats are coming from every different direction. Everybody needs to be monitoring every possible system that they can and every possible data point that they can to find out what their threats are. Now, how are they going about doing that? How do they become aware of these threats? What are the tools that they really should be using?
Yeah, Jeff, there's no shortage of places where, this quote unquote threat may present. As we talked about, it could be an insider threat, could be a threat of industrial or corporate espionage, could be your more traditional workplace violence incident where, early on in the manifestation of a threat, it's a low level argument or disagreement, and what we've seen is, as these escalate, so can the severity of the threat. We go from an argument or a disgruntlement all the way up to and potentially including physical violence. Could be an act of sabotage. Could be, the unintentional oversharing of sensitive information on social media, sloppy security practices, disgruntled former workers. The key thing that we see still dominating the threat management landscape is domestic violence spillover into the workplace. So there's no shortage of threats out there to an organization, and no shortage of threat vectors, right? Ways that they can threaten an organization. But, to us, what's really important is that they have a robust array of monitoring capabilities. That's monitoring online chatter. That's monitoring inbound email traffic. And that's training, and probably most importantly, training the workforce on how to be aware of these threats. And when they become aware, how they report it. When you have hundreds or thousands of sets of eyes and ears out there engaging with the public, with clients, with customers, with vendors, It's the people on the ground that are interacting with those clients and customers and vendors, and those are the people who are going to become aware, most likely, of a potential threat to the organization. They may read it, they may see it, they may experience it on social media. The important part is allowing that person an easy mechanism for reporting that into the organization. Once it's reported into the organization, that's when the investigation and the assessment happens by the threat management team.
And Matt, do you typically find that most of your clients have a robust threat management team in place and they have the personnel to analyze this? Or is this largely done outsourced and they're getting their data in and they're basically getting it provided to them in report format? How's that go in most of your client base?
There's really two categories here that I've seen. It's those larger organizations that have a robust internal capability of trained threat management people, threat assessment people, and then there's those who have virtually nothing, right? Good intentions, but don't have the requisite training and programmatic elements to really tackle modern day threats. And that's where, Artem, maybe you can comment on some of the threat cases that you're working with Resolver. But, we seek to address anybody in that continuum where there's a robust program that exists. A lot of our clients reach out to Kroll when they're out of bandwidth or they need additional subject matter expertise. And those clients and potential clients who don't have the internal infrastructure, a lot of the times we help train their personnel, put the policies and procedures in place, establish the reporting mechanisms, and ultimately train the threat management and threat assessment teams on how to handle threats from inception all the way through to intervention, mitigation, or a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think what we see at Resolver often is the gamut of program maturity customers. So we have everywhere from the very mature customers that have a lot of programs in place. They have a lot of threat monitoring tools and systems in place, and they're looking now for a place for their team to work. So that's being able to ingest everything into one platform, be able to collaborate with your teams and in other internal teams, assign action planning, being able to assess the threats correctly in a consistent manner. So essentially a workflow platform that's powerful enough to work across the organization, connect to their other incident management data as well. And we see customers that are just spinning up their programs and need a lot of help in the methodologies that they want to apply, as well as creating the processes and effectively us helping them build the program to be able to manage threats effectively. And we're seeing a lot more of that recently as more and more organizations are realizing that this is a critical component of their security posture.
Yeah, Artem, I see a lot of organizations more and more coming to the realization that this is critical, right? This is critical to continuity. This is critical to resiliency. This is critical to protecting brand and people and property and executives. And one of the things that I like to highlight is it's not only important to highlight, threat management and threat assessment as a notion, but to really invest in people and process to make sure they're properly trained in identifying threats, truly investigating, and then using all the information that's known to properly assess. And the assessment of threats can be quite tricky. A lot of the times at Kroll, we bring in experts in mental health, whether that's forensic psychiatry or psychology. We bring in criminologists. We bring in handwriting experts and forensic handwriting experts who can review for content, context, syntax, all of these things that may indicate somebody's mental state. And really truly recognizing that if they don't have the internal capabilities or the need or desire to have this organically built within their organization, that they find a partner who has the proper training and methodology, right, to avoid bias, to reduce the potential for missing a critical signal, and to keep people from over or under reacting. Because keep in mind, when an organization or a person is being threatened, anxieties can be high and people can often overreact. So what we need to ensure is that our partners have properly informed and properly trained teams to truly assess the criticality and the legitimacy of any threat that they're assessing.
Yeah, I also like the ability to ensure that everything's being shared properly. The silo effect that we so often see, where HR knows about this issue with this person, and the manager knows about this person with this issue with this person, but it never comes together. And I like the idea with what we're talking about here today is that we have the ability to generate reports. We have the ability to search. We have artificial intelligence, all these different things that are out there to allow us to get this data to the right place so that we are not siloed in our responses and that we are not actually going to have issues because, down the road after the incident took place, we have 5 different people that tell us they knew all these things. They had it in their own systems, but they did not have it in a shared system that everybody got to see. So I like the idea of that. When it really comes down to, what you're seeing today of how the organizations are best sharing this information and compiling this information and being able to sort this information. Obviously, there is like the Resolver tool, but how else do people actually manage this process? How are people ensuring they can do this if they don't have a tool, like Resolver to be able to bring this all together?
That's probably the biggest disconnect that I see throughout all industries and verticals, is even where there's a real desire to tackle these problems with modern day solution and apply all the best tenets of threat management and threat assessment and be on the leading edge of mental health awareness and substance abuse and how those things can exacerbate a threat case. The real disconnect is in connecting the dots and breaking down the silos between business units where, human resources or human capital might have access to certain information, legal might have access to other information, and security and risk management. And all these compartmentalized offices have access to different types of information, and nobody's connecting the dots. There's a real willingness, and that to me is a really, really exciting and powerful capability that Resolver brings to the table.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And additionally to what you mentioned, another thing we often hear from our customers is this very important need to have proper escalation and notification flows, which manual processes don't lend well to. You're either over communicating things that are not sufficiently important and people don't care about, and you fall into the noise category or boy who cried wolf category of, I'm getting too many emails about things that are not important enough, or you fail to communicate something that's very important to a business partner or an executive that they really needed to know about. So with automated communication and notification flows and escalation flows that a platform like Resolver allows, that solves those scenarios for those customers that are very, very important to them, that they know that every time reliably, once I send something down this path, all of the right actions will be taken.
Excellent, excellent. The information you guys have covered has been fantastic so far today. I'm really enthralled by everything that you're giving me. But are there any, as we're wrapping up this particular podcast, any of those last minute messages that we need to make sure that our listeners are aware of when it comes to gathering all this data, using this data, and being effective in threat management? Anything you guys want us to take away from the podcast?
Yeah, I think, over the past couple of years, organizations have moved to be more distributed and operate in a more remote and distributed fashion. And what they're realizing is that means at the same time, their duty of care extends to that remote and distributed world. And that's where we see that shift from a primary focus on physical security moving into the virtual threat protection and online space more and more and more, in that organizations are trying to figure out, okay, how do I still protect my assets and my people in a remote world? And that's where they start to move towards realizing that they really need a more robust threat protection program.
Well, that seems like a good ending point. I'd like to thank both of my guests for coming on today and talking to us. Also, I'd like to thank all of our listeners. Please tune in next month where we're actually going to have a really interesting one on threat management in the healthcare environment and all those particulars that come along with healthcare and the security and risk issues that they face. We'll see you next time.